Hello everyone, welcome back to another ATP Fantasy video. This is Josh from Expected Aces, and ATP Fantasy is now live. We are underway in Monte Carlo, and you guys have been sending in your questions over the last few days. So if you've been confused about any parts of the game, this is the video for you. Let's jump into it. Before we get started, just want to say a massive thank you to everyone who's watched and engaged with the videos so far. I really appreciate all your comments and feedback. I read and respond to every comment. The questions I picked out for this video I thought would be really useful for a wide audience. And a lot of them don't just apply to week 1 in Monte Carlo now that deadline has passed. A lot of these are looking ahead and also more generally about the game. So first up, can I move my players from the starting 6 to the bench and vice versa for tournament week 2? Yes, you can. It's a little bit confusing, but you need to navigate over to the ATP Fantasy homepage on either mobile or desktop. And where it says tournament week 1, you need to click the arrow on the right and go to tournament week 2. You'll then see this message on screen. And once you click OK on that, now you can go ahead and start swapping out your players in your team, choosing your bonus ball player, choosing who's on the bench and who's not. All of that can be done there. I appreciate it's not the most obvious, intuitive feature on the platform. You can make changes to your lineup as many times as you'd like before the deadline, which is next Monday, April 13th. And remember that you've got 2 free switches you can make this week. Any additional changes you make will cost you 50 points from your total score, so do keep that in mind. Do you have to keep the same players each tournament? Again, no you do not. That is entirely up to you. I think there was some confusion here with this question, thinking you had to hold them throughout the entire clay court swing, but that is not the case. As I mentioned, you get 2 free switches this week. If you don't spend them, they carry over. So if you don't spend them, you'll have 4 free switches for tournament week 3. If you spend 1, you'll have 3 for next week. And you have the swing switch chip, which lets you make up to 8 free switches, which you can use on any of the given weeks during the clay court swing. Now, this is an interesting one about the mechanics of the game. How many switches will I have the week after I've played the swing switch chip? There are a lot of unknowns, and this is not in the rules currently, but if it works like other fantasy sports games, then you will come back to the same amount of free switches that you had prior to using the swing switch chip. So if going into tournament week 3, I had 4 free switches and I played my swing switch chip that week, I get to make up to 8 changes for free. When it comes round to tournament week 4, I should then have those 4 free switches again still available to me. In other fantasy sports games, the wildcard chip you play tends to cancel out the free switches or transfers that you gain. So because you played the swing switch chip and did your 8 free switches that week, you come back with the same amount of free switches you had as the week before. It may work that they do give you the extra 2 free switches. We should know this information very soon, but if you had 4 free switches and you played your swing switch chip, there is a chance you come back with 6 free switches the week after, rather than just carrying over your existing 4. But I expect that playing this chip will cancel that out. The next question is in reference to how player pricing works. So it's not the official rankings or the race that you're in rankings as the person's referring to here. It is purely based on the official ATP live rankings that update match after match. So to view this, you need to go over to the ATP site on either desktop or mobile, go over to rankings and then click the live rankings toggle. Here you can see that everyone's points has already been taken off for Monte Carlo last year. So Lorenzo Musetti is now dropped from world number 5 to world number 9. And as a result, his value in the game is now dropped from 27 credits to 17 credits. And with that in mind, they then ask, when should you make switches factoring in these price changes? My advice for this would be only move early if you're going to be priced out of a move. So this would be a scenario where the player you want to get rid of is worth 6 credits and the player you want to bring in is worth 6 credits. If they start getting a few wins this week and their value may go up, then you obviously don't want to be priced out of making that move or forcing yourself to use another free switch to, swap around the funds to make room for the transfer. This would be the only real case to go early. I think it is very, very team dependent. If there's a player that you desperately want and you know they're about to go up in price, then you can make the move. But because you've only got 2 free switches, you cannot min-max the market. You can't, buy the players cheap and then sell them high and build your team value that way. You're going to have to be very strategic and very patient on this. My advice would be is identify the players you're thinking about bringing in for next week. Monitor the data around them, the bonus points they're picking up, look at their form, make sure they don't get injured. The worst thing would be to go early and then they get injured in their following match and you need to burn another switch then to swap them out. So be careful about that. And most importantly, I would wait until the draw has been made for the following week. So for example, when it comes to tournament week 2, the events in Barcelona and Munich, the draws are going to be made this coming Saturday, the 11th of April. So let's say you've got 3 or 4 players in mind who you're thinking about bringing in. Whichever one of those has got the best draw is probably who you're going to go with, but you're not going to know that until Saturday. So going early means you're relying on luck at that point. So with the way I like to approach fantasy games and ATP Fantasy, I'm going to be waiting to have the most information available to me. So I want to know how are they doing in the tournament they're in right now, what's their form been like, how did they perform in this tournament last year, and most importantly, what is their draw looking like right now for their first few rounds in Barcelona or Munich. Switching topics here, will deadlines always be during qualifying? And this will not always be the case. This was a bit of a quirk this week for Monte Carlo, given that it's a Masters 1000 tournament with a 64-player draw rather than 128. Therefore, it's condensed into 8 days rather than 2 weeks. So some first-round matches have to be played while they are playing the second round of qualifying. I can tell you for certain that qualifying will be done when it comes to the tournament week 2 deadline. The deadline is Monday, April 13th, but qualifying for both Barcelona and Munich is happening over this coming weekend on Saturday and Sunday, 11th and 12th of April. So all qualifying will be done. So if you want to bring in a qualifier, you'll know if they're guaranteed to be in the main draw or not by the time that rolls round. Just a reminder as well that qualifying rounds do not count as part of ATP Fantasy scoring. These players have to make the main draw and then they can earn points for the game. Now the juicy stuff, the chip strategy. Luckman0708 wants to know, what is my advice for the strategy across the clay court swing for using your chips? Certain factors may change, but right now this is my plan. I'd like to use the alternates chip in either tournament week 3 or 4 in Madrid or Rome. The main reason for this is that the people on my bench are going to be cheaper players, so therefore I want them to earn at least some points. And you can earn 10 points for losing in round 1 of a Masters 1000 event, whereas you only get 0 points if you lose first round in an ATP 250 or 500 event. So it gives me a nice floor knowing that I am going to earn at least some points when I play this chip. The other good thing about doing it in a Masters 1000 tournament as well is that the point scale much more significantly the further you progress in the tournament. So there's a higher chance to earn more points and a bigger tournament for progressing. If we're looking at Monte Carlo this week, anyone who went through qualifying and then happens to win a first round match is going to immediately get 50 points, which is crazy. It won't be the case in Madrid or Rome because it's a bigger tournament, but one win will get them at least 30 points rather than 10 for losing. So there's huge upside there. For the swing switch chip we've spoken about already, I plan on using that in tournament week 5, which is when we have the events in Geneva and Hamburg. The main reason for this is that we have just had 2 Masters 1000 events back to back, and a lot of the players that were involved in those, especially the premium players, will not be playing this event. So I need to make sure I transfer them all out to make sure I can field a full 6-man squad for this tournament. I would love to have played this chip before Roland Garros, so you can obviously check the draw and build the best team because that's where all the points are. But as you'll see here, I need to save the triple bounce chip for this because that's where the huge upside is as well. But it does mean that you really need to be careful about your free switches and make sure you build them up, because obviously I'm going to want to bring a lot of players back in for tournament week 6 after I swap them out. So I know I'll need at least 4 free switches going into tournament week 6, ideally more. It might even be worth taking some minus 50 penalty points to get more players in, depending on how different my tournament week 5 squad ends up being. But that's something to consider down the line. Triple bounce chip on Roland Garros just makes all the sense in the world to me. It's the most powerful chip and it is where you can earn the most points. If you back the winner of Roland Garros, you're going to get 6,000 points at least from playing that chip then, which is crazy. You're probably not even going to get 6,000 points throughout the other 5 weeks of the swing. So it's crazy powerful. Definitely going to use it then. That would be my advice. And finally, Sinner is not playing in tournament week 2. How do we handle that? Well, he is in my team, so this does directly impact me. So my approach to this is that I am going to swap him out. How I planned for this was that I made sure that I had 5 other players that are playing next week. So when I swap out Sinner, I'll have a full team of 6 guaranteed to be playing in Barcelona or Munich. Given Sinner's price as well, you can go to any player you want, with the exception of Carlos Alcaraz. But if the world number 1 ranking changes hands this week, then suddenly Sinner will be worth 40 credits Alcaraz will be worth 36, and you can then downgrade into Carlos Alcaraz if you don't have him already, which is amazing. So, bit of a subplot to think about there. Remember, if Sinner wins the tournament, he becomes world number 1 no matter what. So on Sunday, he would change to 40 credits. If he makes at least semi-finals and Carlos Alcaraz goes out early, then it could also happen then as well. It could change hands. So if you have Sinner but you don't have Alcaraz, my advice would be to switch to Alcaraz. But I appreciate that if their price points don't change, you don't really want to spend 2 free switches to make that move. I still would say it's worth it. I think if you don't have Alcaraz, I think you really need to make the move from Sinner to Alcaraz. If you're like me and you own both, then you want to downgrade Sinner to a premium player who's playing next week. And my advice for this would actually be to pick the player you think's got the best chance of winning in Munich, because Alcaraz is most likely to win in Barcelona. So therefore, to get the most points next week, you want to have the winners from both events. You need to look at the players and choose who you think is going to win in Munich. Zverev is a defending champion. There are other possibilities as well. You could downgrade to Ben Shelton or Taylor Fritz, but I definitely would look at Munich rather than Barcelona for your premium pick to replace Sinner. That's it for this video. Thank you for watching. If you've got any questions, please let me know in the comments. If you like this video as well, then I'll definitely do more of this Q&A style content. Get involved in the YouTube community for expected aces. Also make sure you join our subreddit, which is r/ATP Fantasy. And follow us on socials as well. And join the league. The code is on screen right now as we get underway in Monte Carlo this week. By the way, the team you can see on screen is the most selected team this week for Monte Carlo, with their player ownerships on screen. Obviously worth noting you couldn't afford this entire squad, but it gives you a good idea of who the most popular players are in the game. That's all for now. Speak to you soon. Full preview for Barcelona and Munich coming on later in the week. Bye for now.